Signs of North Korea preparing to demolish roads connected to the south have been spotted, leading the South Korean military to raise its security posture. South Korea's tech exports in September shot up by 24% year-on-year to over $22 billion, boosted by strong chip demands. China mobilizes its army, navy, air, and rocket forces for drills to surround Taiwan, following recent remarks on independence by Taipei. It's October 14th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with North Korea yet again raising tensions. Signs indicate that Pyongyang is preparing to demolish land links between the two Koreas, which could happen as early as today. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has the latest.
North Korea appears to be getting ready to blow up roads along the Gyeonggi and Donghae railway lines connecting the two Koreas. During Monday's briefing, the Joint Chiefs of Staff confirmed as such.
They have installed barriers on the roads, and activities behind those barriers are being identified. Preparatory work is underway to blow them up. I believe it could happen as soon as today.
In response to the regime's increasing threats, South Korean military has reportedly strengthened surveillance and its readiness posture, though the JCS did not confirm further details. The reclusive state is already said to have launched a project last week to cut off roads and railways. But such activities have been reported after the General Staff of the North Korean People's Army delivered an Operation Preparatory Directive to artillery combined forces near the border and units assigned important firepower missions to be ready for full-scale shooting by Saturday at 8 p.m. The regime's urge for such readiness comes as Pyongyang had claimed on Friday night that Seoul sent unmanned aerial vehicles carrying propaganda leaflets to its capital on October 3rd, 9th, and 10th. South Korea first denied sending drones, but later held an ambiguous stance. Kim Yo-jong, the sister of the regime's leader, warned on Sunday that Seoul would face a horrible disaster if South Korean drones are flown over the North's capital again. Saying the North isn't concerned about who the main force is behind the recent drone incident, Kim added that it would take strong retaliatory action if drones carrying anti-regime leaflets infiltrate the regime's territory again. The South's defense ministry released a response, warning the reclusive state on Sunday that it will see the end of the regime if it causes any harm to its people. U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell has a scheduled visit to Seoul on Wednesday, and is set to hold a vice ministerial meeting with South Korean and Japanese counterparts regarding North Korea's ongoing provocations. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
North Korea continues ratcheting up tensions and renews threats targeting the south, this time accusing Seoul of sending unmanned aerial vehicles into its airspace over Pyongyang. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil explains the regime's intention behind and what might come next.
This isn't the first time North Korea has heightened tensions on the peninsula for its own purposes, the Unification Ministry spokesperson said on Monday.
North Korea has routinely created crises in inter-Korean relations whenever it suits its needs. A recent similar case occurred in June 2020 when it blew up the Inter-Korean Liaison Office. Another instance took place in 2015 when it escalated tensions following a landmine provocation.
The spokesperson reiterated that the South Korean government remains fully prepared with all necessary military measures in place. While Seoul has neither confirmed nor denied the North's allegations about UAVs flying over Pyongyang, experts suggest this ambiguity serves a strategic purpose.
The stance that South Korean government is taking is called strategic ambiguity. And this is not to reveal capability of intelligence gathering and also not to reveal our own intention and our own analysis that could lead to our conclusion. And also pressure for the North Korea to reveal its own intention accordingly.
Professor Kim also noted that Pyongyang's threats may be more rhetorical than actionable, but urged caution. Adding to this, Professor Imul-chul of Gyeongnam University warned against undermining the risk, citing the North Korean Defense Ministry's declaration to shoot down any South Korean UAVs should they enter its airspace again. He emphasized that diplomatic efforts are crucial to preventing an escalation into full-scale war.
The North Korean Defense Ministry has declared that they will shoot down any South Korean UAVs that enter their space. Such actions could escalate the situation further. Considering diplomatic channels could significantly reduce military tensions at this point, North Korea's level of provocation, its intensity, and method will likely depend on how government chooses to respond.
With both sides on high alert, Seoul is carefully monitoring the situation. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Defense delegates from South Korea, Australia, Japan, and New Zealand, also known as the Indo-Pacific Four, are scheduled to sit down on the margins of the NATO defense ministerial meeting in Brussels later this week. According to a number of media outlets here, ways to promote partnership with NATO members will be on the agenda of this inaugural gathering of the IP4 nations. This gathering reportedly comes at the request of Australia. Vice Defense Minister Kim Sun-ho will attend the gathering. Elsewhere, Israeli tanks have reportedly forced their way into a peacekeeping base in southern Lebanon. Israel's prime minister called on U.S. troops to leave the region, but they refused to do so. Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
The Israeli military claimed it found a tunnel linked to a Hezbollah weapons cache and a secret base near the border, which could have been used to blow up a wall adjacent to a United Nations peacekeeper base. This followed a UN statement on Sunday that said Israeli tanks had burst into one of its peacekeeper bases in southern Lebanon. The UN interim force there said 2 Israeli tanks destroyed the main gate of the base and forced their way into it. UNIFIL added that after the tanks left, shells exploded some 100 meters away, releasing smoke that sickened a number of UN personnel. However, Israel says Hezbollah had fired anti-tank missiles at Israeli troops and the tanks that had been helping evacuate casualties under fire before backing into the UNIFIL post unintentionally. The Israeli military's international spokesperson stressed that tanks were trying to get out of harm's way, adding that the maneuver could not be considered storming a base. Following the incident, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called on the UN to immediately remove its peacekeeping force from the region. Directing his statement to UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, the Israeli leader said Hezbollah was using the international troops as human shields. He added that despite the Israeli Defense Forces' continued calls for a withdrawal, UNIFIL has refused to leave. Meanwhile, a 5th UN peacekeeper was shot and wounded in southern Lebanon on Saturday, though the source of the attack is unknown. The injury comes after 2 Indonesian peacekeepers were injured, falling from an observation tower after Israeli tanks fired at it on Thursday, while 2 Sri Lankan soldiers were also injured on Friday. In response, 40 countries that have deployed their troops to UNIFIL issued a joint statement on Saturday, strongly condemning the Israeli attack on the peacekeeping force. The joint statement stressed that the role of the peacekeepers was vital in light of the heightened tensions in the region, condemning the recent series of attacks by Israel. It added that such acts must be stopped immediately and be properly investigated. South Korea is among the 40 countries that have sent troops to Lebanon. Meanwhile, more than 60 Israelis were injured in a drone attack conducted by Hezbollah in north-central Israel on Sunday, marking one of the bloodiest attacks since last October. This comes as the Iran-backed militant group said it had launched a swarm of attack drones on an Israeli infantry camp. The militants say the attack was in response to Thursday's Israeli strikes in Lebanon that killed 22 people and injured 117 others. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
China held a large-scale military drill surrounding Taiwan, mobilizing its planes, ships, and rocket forces in response to recent remarks about independence by Taipei. Pei Yun-ji reports.
This image of a map aired on Chinese state media shows 6 large blocks surrounding Taiwan, indicating the locations where the military drills are being held. The Chinese military said Monday that it has organized its Army, Navy, Air Force, and Rocket Force troops to conduct the Joint SOAR 2024B drills in the Taiwan Strait and north, south, and east of the island. Without saying when the exercises would end, it added that the drills will act as a stern warning to the separatist acts of Taiwan independence forces. Taiwan's defense ministry said it detected 25 Chinese aircraft, as well as a total of 7 Chinese warships near the island on Monday morning.
This action of China did not comply with the international regulation that requires one to make an early announcement before a drill. And threatening another country with military power also contradicts the United Nations Charter that emphasizes peaceful settlement of disputes.
The latest military drills are widely seen as an apparent protest against Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te's speech last week, saying that China has no right to represent Taiwan. While emphasizing his determination to defend Taiwan's sovereignty, he said his government is willing to work with Beijing to contribute to international goals, such as achieving global peace.
On this land, democracy and freedom are growing and thriving. The People's Republic of China has no right to represent Taiwan.
Lai, who took office in May, has been rejecting the Chinese government's claims over the island. China, which claims self-governed Taiwan as part of its territory, last held drills surrounding the island in May. It also held massive military exercises around Taiwan in 2022, after then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi made a brief visit. 배은지, Arirang News.
Korea's exports of ICT products soared in September, driven by chip sales overseas to rake in over $22 billion. Our correspondent Moon Hye-ryun has more.
Strong semiconductor exports due to the AI boom once again led South Korea's tech shipments overseas. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy showed that ICT exports in September rose by 24% compared to the same month the year before, adding up to $22.36 billion. This is the second highest amount for a month's worth of ICT exports on record and marks the 11th consecutive month that the country's tech exports recorded a year-on-year increase. The ministry attributed this to a rise in demand for chips in the artificial intelligence sector. The total value of semiconductor exports last month recorded an all-time high, coming in at more than $13.6 billion, once again recording growth in the double digits. This is showcased by exports of memory chips, including high-bandwidth memory semiconductors, which show significant growth of more than 60% year-on-year. As for other tech exports, computers and computer accessories surged by more than double year-on-year, while mobile phone shipments climbed by more than 25% on the back of the release of the foldable Galaxy Z series from Samsung Electronics in July, which continued its popularity into September. However, exports of displays and telecommunication equipment saw a decline. By country, tech exports to China, South Korea's main destination for ICT shipments, accounting for more than 41% of the total, continue to grow for the 11th month in a row. Shipments to the United States also rose by nearly 40% year-on-year, particularly for computer storage devices such as SSDs, which jumped by more than 250%. Meanwhile, ICT imports came to around $12.5 billion, leaving the ICT trade balance in the black once more. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
The number of female employees in the country has exceeded 10 million for the first time this year. According to Statistics Korea on Monday, there was a monthly average of 10.15 million female salary workers from January until August. That's approximately 46% of the nation's paid workforce. There was also a record 1.7 million self-employed female workers during the same period, as more women are participating in the labor force. The Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences has been awarded to economists Daron Acemoglu, Simon Johnson, and James Robinson for studies of how institutions are formed and affect a country's prosperity. The announcement was made on Monday in Stockholm. The chair of the Economics Prize Committee said that thanks to the economists' groundbreaking research, we now have a much deeper understanding of why countries fail or succeed. This marks the end of the Nobel Prizes awarded this year. On the cultural front, Jeju will shortly become the second of the 7 BTS members to complete his 18-month mandatory military service. His agency Big Hit Music announced on Monday that Jeju will be discharged from the army on Thursday, October 17th. It added that there will be no special events that day, asking fans to refrain from visiting the site for safety reasons. Jin was the first member to reunite with the band's fandom army in June. Fans will have to wait until at least June 2025 to see all members discharged and BTS back together again. The transition to clean energy is taking place in small but tangible steps at a camping program over in Korea's southern resort island of Jeju. Our Park Go-nu has the story.
A pleasant eco-friendly camping adventure utilizing renewable energy. This is available on South Korea's largest island, Jeju, by using its plentiful natural resources, including wind power. As part of the net zero target of 2035, Jeju held its first RE100 camping event last week at the Dongbok Bukchon wind farm, sourcing renewable electricity for cooking and lighting the site, among others.
With renewable energy generated from the wind power at the site, you can charge your own phone just like me. Now I'm ready for more eco-friendly experiences. By riding this electric bicycle charged with renewable energy, you can enjoy the beautiful nature of Jeju while breathing in the fresh air.
A total of 100 campers signed up on a first-come, first-served basis enjoyed themselves during the one-night stay.
I've always been interested in recycling, so participating in this was meaningful. I rode an electric bike for the first time and it was fun. I'm looking forward to the barbecue, especially as you can't miss out on eating when camping.
Pork barbecued using electricity generated from wind power, along with farm produce from Jeju including carrots, was served to the campers for dinner. And as the camping was held at a site filled with abundant natural scenery, the campers were able to engage with nature as well. While trekking Gotjawar Forest, a kind of volcanic ecosystem in Jeju, campers had a chance to listen carefully to the sounds of nature with headsets and a small recorder.
I felt really comfortable as I was absorbed in the sounds of nature. It was fun to experience these activities with campers interested in environmental issues. I would like to keep coming here.
An official from the Jeju Tourism Organization is confident that the experience will continue to be popular.
Considering the environment and energy transition is a global trend, various eco-friendly events and content are being made. That's why our renewable energy camping is more unique.
He also said Jeju will be planning many more of these eco-friendly camping programs to bring more tourists to the region down the road. Park Go-nu, Arirang News, Jeju.
It is time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello there.
Let's first start with football and the South Korean national team back in action tomorrow night.
Yes, facing Iraq at home. It's the last World Cup qualifier of this October international break. The first was played on Thursday, beating Jordan away 2-0. Thanks to goals from Lee Jae-sung and Oh Hyun-gyu for his first for the national team. The game on Tuesday night, though, is at Yongin Mida Stadium and not Seoul World Cup Stadium, as is normally the case for World Cup qualifiers. The fixture was moved due to the current state of the playing surface in Seoul, with lots having been said about the home of FC Seoul and the national team, including by Son Heung-min and Jesse Lingard. Iraq, though, they sit level on 7 points with Korea in Group B, meaning a win for either team would give them a clear lead.
It was an important win on Thursday, but it came at a cost of 2 players picking up injuries, unfortunately.
Yes, you're right. Ji-sung and Hwang Yi-chan were both taken off injured. Hwang went off early in the first half with an ankle issue. Came on in his place, but was then replaced himself 6 minutes into the second half by Bae Jun-ho due to a knee injury. Bae later got the assist for Oh Hyun-gu to make it 2-0. 2 players have been called up instead. Lee Sung-woo is in for a first call-up in 5 years. He admitted to the media on Monday that because it was so last minute, he could only get a standing ticket for the KTX train up to Seoul from Jeonju. His Jeonbuk teammate Min Son-min has also been called up. Son is, of course, out injured, but posted on Instagram on Sunday to say that he is back soon.
And staying with football, K-League returns this Friday with the final round.
Yes, that's right. The league table in K-League 1 is split into 2, Final A and Final B. In Final A, Ulsan HD, Gimcheon Sangmu, Gangwon FC, Pohang Steelers, FC Seoul and Suwon FC will play each other once more and compete for the championship and to earn AFC Champions League qualification. Likewise, the 6 teams in Final B will play each other once more, and no one is safe from relegation, including the higher-ranked Gwangju FC and Jeju United. The bottom 4 of Incheon United, Daejeon Hana Citizen, Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors and Daegu FC are separated by just 6 points. 1 team will go down automatically and 2 more will have to go through the promotion relegation playoffs, including potentially 9-time champions Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors.
Now let's talk about baseball. We're getting closer to the KBO League Korean series.
Yes, we are indeed. The playoffs got underway on Sunday. The Samsung Lions beat the LG Twins 10-4 in what was the first postseason meeting between these 2 old rivals in 22 years. The Twins had beaten KT Wiz to make it this far, but now have work to do to get back into the series. Now, Game 2 was supposed to begin tonight at 6:30, but has been called off due to the rain. The winners of this week's series will face the Kia Tigers in the Korean series. The Tigers won the regular season championship and earned a bye through to the Korean series.
All right, thanks for the info, Paul. See you next week.
Thank you. See you.
Today and tomorrow, it will rain mainly in the Chungcheongdo provinces and the southern regions. By tomorrow, there will be 20 to 80 millimeters of rain in Gyeongsang-Namdo province, 10 to 60 on Jeju Island and in Jeollanam-do province, and 5 to 40 in Chungcheongdo, Jeollabuk-do, and Gyeongsangbuk-do provinces. In the Seoul metropolitan area and Gangwon-do province, it will rain lightly or sporadically. By tomorrow, the eastern part of the South Sea and the southern part of Jeju Island could be windy and the waves could be as high as 2.5 meters. Those in this area should pay special attention to coastal safety accidents. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daejeon, Daegu will start off at 17 degrees Celsius, Gwangju 19 degrees. Highs will be topping out at 24 in Seoul and Daejeon, Gyeongju and Jeju 26 degrees. There's rain forecast in eastern part of Gangwon-do province on Wednesday due to the influence of the easterly winds, and the temperature is expected to drop after rain across the country in the second half of the week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
요즘 한국에선 어떻게 노는지 알려줄까?
한국에선 아이돌이 되어볼 수도 인생 번호를 찾을 수도 있지.
제일 핫한 포토 스팟은 여기.
한국은 분명 너에게 새로운 영감을 줄 거야.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸? 진짜 한국에선 어떻게 먹는지 알려줄까?
K-바비큐? 신김치랑 먹어야지.
치킨? 치맥 페스티벌은 처음이지?
김치? 종류만큼 먹는 법도 가지각색.
김밥? 시장에선, 산에선, 바다에선 이렇게.
국밥? 취향 따라, 입맛 따라.
이런 한국, 와보지 않고는 모를걸?
우리 앞에는 반드시 해결해야 하는 중차대한 역사적 과제가 있습니다. 바로 통일입니다. 헌법이 대통령에게 명령한 자유민주주의 평화 통일의 책무에 의거해서 우리의 통일 비전과 통일 추진 전략을 우리 국민과 북한 주민 그리고 국제사회에 선언하고자 합니다. 국민의 자유와 안전이 보장되는 행복한 나라, 창의와 혁신으로 도약하는 강하고 풍요로운 나라, 국제사회의 화합과 발전을 선도하며 세계의 평화와 번영에 기여하는 나라, 이것이 바로 통일 대한민국의 미래입니다. 이러한 통일 대한민국으로 나아가기 위한 우리의 과제를 제시하고자 합니다. 첫째, 우리 국민이 자유 통일을 추진할 수 있는 가치관과 역량을 더욱 확고히 가져야 하고, 둘째는 북한 주민이 자유 통일을 간절히 원하도록 변화를 만들어내야 하며, 셋째는 국제사회와 연대해야 한다는 것입니다. 자유를 위협하는 안팎의 도전에 맞서 더 큰 대한민국, 통일 대한민국으로 우리 모두 힘차게 나아갑시다.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we're joined by experts to discuss the most up-to-date issues from across the globe. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. In one of the bloodiest attacks since the beginning of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict, Hezbollah fired attack drones on an army base in Israel on Sunday, killing 4 Israeli soldiers and injuring more than 60 people. The Iran-backed militant group says that the attack was in response to Israeli strikes in Lebanon held Thursday, which took the lives of 22 people. More than 1,500 people have been killed and more than 8,000 injured in Lebanon since September 16, when Israel stepped up its campaign against Hezbollah. International organizations have been expressing deep concern, urging the two sides to stop the escalation of conflict. So what exactly do the two sides want out of this conflict, and what are the implications for possible peace negotiations? For answers to this, we connect to Paek Seung-hoon, researcher at the Institute of Middle East Studies. Good evening, Mr. Paek.
Good evening.
And we're also joined by Austin J. Nupe, assistant professor of political science at Utah State University. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here.
Great to have you both. Now let's start the discussion with Mr. Paek. The ongoing conflict in Gaza has now surpassed a year already. Can you provide an assessment of the current situation in the Middle East? How severe is it?
So the U.S. is sending a THAAD, the battery, to Israel, along with the U.S. troop to operate it. So this decision was made by Pentagon just a few hours after Iran warned the U.S. to keep its military forces out of Israel. And Israel is also widely believed to be preparing a military response to Iran's October 1st attack, which Iran fired roughly 180 ballistic missiles into Israel. So there are speculation that Israel will target nuclear facility or oil refineries of Iran. So Israel has been escalating its campaign against Hezbollah with waves of heavy airstrike across Lebanon and a ground invasion at the border after a year of exchange of fire with each other. But the problem is attack of Israel become more bold and uncategorical. So it had recently attacked PKO, the peacekeeping operation forces of UN and NGO like Blue Helmet. So that is, Israel is now at two-front war with Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. So Israel offensive in Gaza has killed at least 42,227 people, including 16,765 children, children, and more than 98,464 people injured and more than 10,000 people missing. So, and in Gaza, 80% of commercial facilities and 87% of school buildings and 17 of 36 hospitals are particularly functional, and other 19 is out of service. So, and 68% of road networks and 68% of cropland are destroyed. So, in Lebanon, death toll has passed 2,300. So, but one thing is for sure, if the full-scale war happens between Israel and Hezbollah, it won't be one-side warfare as it had been between Israel and Hamas. So early morning today, in local time on Sunday, 4 soldiers were killed, as you have said it, and in Hezbollah drone attack on army base next to Binyamin city. And IDF confirmed the strike on Sunday evening killed 4 and severely injured 7 soldiers, and total of 60 people are injured. So it is the deadliest Hezbollah strike since Israel launched its ground invasion of Lebanon on 30th of September. So, but once a ground war is in full swing on both sides, it won't be proceeded as Israel Defense Force had planned for. So it is what is going on in Lebanon right now.
Right. Thank you for the summary. It sounds very serious. Now, turning to Professor Nupe, Israel had warned of retaliation against potential ballistic missile strikes from Iran. Reports indicate that President Biden and Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu have been coordinating on the level of response. What's Israel's likely threshold for retaliation, especially concerning airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually are not entirely sure, which makes the risk of escalation all the more concerning. Reports from the United States suggest that the Biden administration has set a red line
at attacking Iran's nuclear infrastructure, and it's unclear as to whether or not the Israelis can unilaterally affect Iran's nuclear program through a preemptive strike. A lot of the facilities, especially the military component of the program, are hardened against attack, and it would be very, very difficult in a preemptive strike to significantly degrade or destroy Iran's nuclear capability. At the same time, initially weeks ago, there was a suggestion that a combination of Israeli or American forces would attack Iranian energy infrastructure. The problem is that Iran could retaliate and attack Saudi or other Gulf energy infrastructure as well, both petroleum and natural gas. And so that would lead to a retaliatory strike, would increase global energy prices, would create more chaos in the Persian Gulf. We saw recently a subtle but significant strike by Israel on Iranian assets in the Syrian embassy at the Syrian consulate outside of Damascus. And so it could be that the Israelis are sending a signal to Iran, a retaliatory signal in an effort not to escalate, but to respond to the initial missile salvo previously. But we're not entirely sure. We're not entirely sure whether or not the Netanyahu coalition or the national security element of his government would brief the United States prior to an attack. There's good reason to suggest that they would preemptively attack without letting the Americans know. Which would be a major escalatory step and would really limit the Americans' ability to de-escalate the tensions there as well.
Right. But in the case of Iran, it has warned that if Israeli strikes target its nuclear facilities, it may consider changing its nuclear strategy. Professor, sure. What do they mean by this? What would be the regional impact of such a shift in Iran's nuclear policy?
Right, so one could imagine in the aftermath of an Israeli attack, let's say they partially destroy Iran's nuclear capability. You can destroy the physical infrastructure. You cannot destroy or eliminate the engineering know-how or the expertise, the knowledge institutions it takes to develop a program. So it would not be surprising in the aftermath of an attack in the following 2, 3, 5 years for Iran to reconstruct those facilities under mountains in the Iranian countryside, where they would harden it against further attack. Right now, a lot of the military assets are already hardened against preemptive attack. So they would further protect those assets, much as what we see in North Korea, actually, where they would the Iranians recognize that their nuclear weapons program is the best life insurance against foreign-imposed regime change. They view that as an existential threat to the regime because it prevents foreign attack or a foreign decapitation strike. And so it wouldn't be surprising for them to reconstruct those facilities, harden them against attack, receive a significant engineering consultation and help from Russia, if not China. And it would further create instability. What we would see in the aftermath then is the Americans could very well supply Saudi Arabia with a civilian nuclear program in an effort to decrease the time it would take for Saudis to build the bomb, what we call breakout capacity. They could have a civilian, peaceful nuclear energy program that then to counter Iran, and that would be the first stages of a more severe regional arms race in the Gulf.
Okay. Now, we cannot, at this point, we cannot help but ask, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel will push through with the conflict until its objectives are achieved. Now, Mr. Peck, what are Israel's ultimate goals in this ongoing war?
The overarching objectives of Israel military at this juncture is to neutralize Hezbollah, which has constituted the most imminent threat to the state of Israel due to its geographical proximity and formidable military capabilities. So on 23rd September, Israel Military Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared the Operation Arrow to the North a significant bombing campaign in Lebanon and stated that the objective was to destroy what Hezbollah has built up over 20 years. So the destruction of Hezbollah represents a significant achievement in the regional hegemonic competition with Iran. But nevertheless, it remains uncertain whether Israel will succeed in achieving its objective, given that Lebanon is not a territory that can be occupied or isolated in the same manner as Gaza. So as we have witnessed how Hezbollah become a strong organization during the 1985 to 2000 occupation, on Israel occupation of Lebanese territory could lead to an increase of Hezbollah's influence in Lebanon, including more sophisticated Iranian support. So we are not sure how the so-called neutralizing Hezbollah will gonna lead to. So, and a lot of experts are kind of having a skeptical on Israel cannot demolish the Hezbollah influences in the region. So that is the biggest the question mark that we have. But Israel, they just declare that they were going to push it to the end. But including me, some of the experts are thinking that they're pushing it to as far as they could. So when the presidential elections of United States are decided, they're going to have a higher position when they're doing a peace negotiation with Hezbollah and Iran. But one thing is clear, that there will be no peace negotiation with the Hamas. I mean, like what they have proclaimed in the beginning of the warfare. I mean, Israel is pushing themselves to end Hamas, so there will be no Hamas in the post-war era.
Right. So a very straightforward goal that you mentioned. Some analysts suggest that the current ground battle would ultimately hinder Israel's strategic position. Mr. Peck, what are your thoughts on this? Specifically, how might the rebuilding of Hezbollah's command structure and guerrilla tactics affect Israel's military power?
So the Israel military aim is to disrupt the axis of resistance by destroying Hamas and weaken the Hezbollah. The idea is that by breaking down the Iranian proxy coalition, the mastermind who attach its string on its proxy, which is Iran, will also be dealt a fatal blow. However, the chance of a complete collapse of the axis of resistance are highly unlikely. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are too deeply embedded in their communities, and it could not be easily wiped out. So just think about a war on terror with Al-Qaeda. Does the agent who commit terror has gone for good? Who is ruling Afghanistan now? I mean, even if they collapse, appalling tragedy that embedded to Palestinians and Lebanese citizens will haunt them and revive as new agent of terror, like as when PLO become moderate, Hamas has emerged. Many Middle East analysis, including me, analysis that analyzes that the longer the war goes on, the less favorable the outcome for Israel. It could end up fighting a war of attrition against the hard-to-destroy axis of resistance, failing to achieve its objective and wasting its energy. I mean, Hezbollah has shown its enormous capability of resilience when Hezbollah's secretive military commander, Mustafa Baradin, described in the court record as an untraceable ghost, was killed in 2016. He was nicknamed Dhur al-Fikr, referring to the legendary sword of the Ali, the fourth caliph after the Prophet Muhammad. Because he was a legendary army general of Hezbollah, every media analyzed Hezbollah has weakened. But we have witnessed his substitute has risen, like Fuad Shukr, Ali Karaki, Ibrahim Akil. So, I mean, Hezbollah, they've been showing their resilience of keep a new figurehead coming up. So, like Israel, in short term, we are seeing that they are winning the war, but like in a short term. But if we analyze in the midterm or long term, we don't know. I mean, like Hezbollah have shown their resilience, so it is not like Israel could end this war with absolute victory.
Right. Now, with the escalating conflict, the effectiveness of the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 in resolving the conflict has come into question. So, Professor Nabi, can you explain what this resolution entails and what are the key factors that would enable it to function more effectively?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the UN Security Council resolution came into effect in the late 1970s, about 5 years into the beginning of Lebanon's civil war. Of course, that was an internal conflict that, because it involved Palestinian paramilitary groups, it eventually involved the Israeli invasion of Lebanon just a few years into that peacekeeping mission. So what we've seen over the past approximately 40 years is a modest peacekeeping force along the border between South Lebanon and Israel, something called the Blue Line, which is the peacekeeping border between both states. It involves between 200 and 300 peacekeepers, about 46 different installations. And as is the case with most UN peacekeeping operations, their mandate and rules of engagement are premised on neutrality. So they're there to protect the civilian population, but not to affect the balance of power, the balance of forces in South Lebanon. The problem is there are severely given the escalation of conflict.
Right.
So they're much like the civilians in South Lebanon. They're stuck in the middle of a conflict.
Right, Professor Nabi.
Yeah.
Hello?
So what we see. Yeah,
Right.
go ahead.
We had some network disruptions. Can you continue?
Yeah, so what we see is the inadvertent injuring or attacks on UN peacekeeping forces. The UN peacekeepers are ineffective in their mission to protect civilians and discriminate between Lebanese civilians on the one hand and Hezbollah militants on the other. And so they're they don't have enough capability to actually fulfill their mission. They're understaffed, and as we saw over the weekend, they are also the victim of indiscriminate violence from the IDF. So it's a real they unfortunately are a really ineffective force at this time to prevent further escalation in the Israeli ground war into South Lebanon.
Right. Now let's touch upon the civilians. Mr. Peck, how have public sentiments in both Israel and Palestine evolved during this prolonged conflict? And most importantly, what are the implications for future peace negotiations?
In recent years, the Israel public sentiment has been characterized by increased polarization. On one hand, a substantial portion of the population remains skeptical of Palestinian leadership, particularly Hamas, which governs Gaza. On the other hand, some progressive faction in Israel society still advocate for dialogue and a two-state solution. But the growing influence of right-wing political parties, particularly since the 2009 election of Benjamin Netanyahu, reflects a strong preference for a security-first approach and skepticism of territorial concessions. And with recent conflict, majority of Israel, whether they like the Netanyahu's leadership or not, have lost their faith on Hamas. So it won't be easy for Israel's citizens to talk on Israel-Palestine peace process as Hamas being its counterpart. So that's why the current government are in full leash to get rid of like Hamas without any grudge feeling. And for Palestinian side, over the past 2 decades, the split between the PA, the Fatah government governing the West Bank, and Hamas, which is controlling Gaza, has further complicated the Palestinian public opinions. While the Fatah PA has maintained a more moderate approach, advocating for diplomacy, Hamas has gained significant support due to its opposition to Israel and its defiance during the conflicts such as the war in Gaza in 2008, 2014, 2021. So the ongoing blockade of Gaza, coupled with economic hardship, has radicalized public sentiment in region, with many Palestinians feeling that peace negotiations have failed to bring meaningful change. So even if Hamas is gone and Gaza needs a group who could mandate its peace talk with Israel, but with its trauma of like Palestinians and Israel aggression they had faced, no one could tell that moderate group could make Gaza Palestinians satisfied during the negotiation with Israel. So as both sides has big scar, the peace process will go through very rocky and winding paths. So I mean, like, it won't be an easy task because in near future. So I think it needs some time to progress.
Right, so we're expecting a rocky road ahead. Then at this point, what role does international diplomacy play in this conflict? Are there any significant players or upcoming events that could influence the situation, Professor Nabi?
I think the biggest significant international event affecting the crisis is the American election in 3 weeks. And so my sense is that the Prime Minister Netanyahu in particular is waiting to see the result of the U.S. election. In the event that Vice President Harris ascends to the presidency, we can expect a very similar diplomatic approach to Biden, which I think would frustrate the coalition's relationship with the United States. You'd see very similar dynamics, I would suspect, to what you saw in the relationship between Prime Minister Netanyahu and former President Barack Obama, where there was a visible disdain and disgust from Netanyahu to the American president, premised on Obama's inexperience in the region. And so that's what we would expect with the Harris administration. It's hard to tell right now on the campaign trail. She's not signaling much of a difference with respect to U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. I think she can't afford to do that because she's running as an incumbent. She can't afford to be on the campaign trail criticizing the current president. On the other hand, if we see a second Trump administration, there's a lot more uncertainty. Obviously, there's a personal affinity between former President Trump and Netanyahu on the one hand, where you saw a progression of the Abraham Accords, this alliance network, this diplomatic network between Israel and the Gulf states, as well as states in North Africa. So on the one hand, you may see an effort to recharge the Abraham Accords. On the other, we know that former President Trump is unpredictable and temperamental. And if he suspects that he's being conned or mistreated by Netanyahu, you could see a real change in U.S. policy vis-a-vis Tel Aviv. And so I think that's a greater source of uncertainty with respect to the future. The Americans have a role to play, but right now they're being very ineffective managing regional tensions, especially with key allies like Jordan.
Right. So the U.S. elections would definitely play a big role in the direction of the conflict. I'm afraid we'll have to cut it right here. We're running out of time. Thank you so much for your insights, gentlemen. Let's hope the situation would at least cool down as peacefully as possible. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Now that wraps up our program for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at 8:30 p.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.